Good evening, and thank you, everyone. I would say welcome Columbus, but I know we have people from Texas and California, Seattle, the East Coast, and I hear New Zealand. So welcome, everybody. And thank you to the first event of ShowOHI 2021. We have Arnab Nandi from Mobikit, Grant Schneider from Upstart, our new Dean of Engineering, Ayanna Howard, and Cheryl Turnbull of the Kenan Center for Entrepreneurship. She will be hosting this short Q&A panel session. So Cheryl, I turn it over to you.
There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're excited to have you with us. I'm responsible for the Kenan Center for Entrepreneurship, which supports faculty, staff, student, and alumni startups with resources such as capital, programming, and mentorship. So delighted to have you here. And I have to say, I'm very excited about our panelists here tonight. I'm gonna have each of our panelists introduce themselves, but I'm gonna start off with Dr. Arnab Nandi, a distinguished faculty member who took a entrepreneurial sabbatical in order to start his own company, Mobikit. Arnab, if you wouldn't mind just spending a few minutes introducing yourself.
Sure. I'm Arnab. I like to work on large data, and I like to build software that helps humans interact with data better and faster. I've also done a few things in the last few years at Ohio State, including being one of the co-founders of OHIO, which I'm so very happy to see it thriving under this amazing team that is putting it together right now. Mobikit was a multi-year project at Ohio State in the area of spatiotemporal analytics, so data that has location and time components, and then we spun it out into the area of essentially connected vehicles, where we were able to build out a stack. And so it's a kit for mobility data, and that's what the startup was about.
Thanks, Arnab. Next, I'd like to introduce Grant Schneider, who I didn't realize is also Dr. Grant Schneider. I guess I should have figured that out because Grant has multiple degrees. He spent a long time at Ohio State. We're super glad to count him as an alum. And the fact that he joined Upstart and then brought Upstart back to Columbus, Ohio, we're just so proud. So Grant, if you wouldn't mind spending a few moments introducing yourself and what you do at Upstart.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. And thank you all for coming and thank you for having me. Yeah, so as Cheryl mentioned, I think outside of being an employee of the university, I probably spent as much time as one possibly could at Ohio State. So I think between getting a few minors and grad school and ultimately doing a PhD, I think I had spent 10 years at Ohio State. Very much not the plan when I started, but just loved it too much. After getting the PhD, they kind of said, okay, well, we don't have any more degrees, like you got to get out of here and go get a job. So when it was time to go get a job, I started looking at, various opportunities and various places where I could apply some knowledge of statistics and computer science and so on. And had settled on a kind of traditional-ish job doing modeling at a finance company. Was going to go to Washington, D.C. to kind of support my wife, who also has a stats PhD. And we were going to go out there and I was going to have a job that paid the bills while she chased the job that she liked. I read about this startup called Upstart that really blew me away in terms of the mission and the problem they were trying to solve. So essentially trying to close the gap between the very small number of people who have access to affordable credit and the much larger group of people who have never had any problems with credit, been late or defaulted. Using kind of modern machine learning techniques. Long story short, I sent them a cold email. They responded. Luckily, I flew out there, was blown away by the team. My wife and I dropped everything, packed up the car, went out to Silicon Valley. Loved it. Great place to start a career. Started to realize that if I wanted to have kids and a house and all the stuff that I now want to have as a slightly older man, it was going to be hard to do in the Bay Area. started scheming on how to do that and had the opportunity to come back here to Columbus and start up our second headquarters in 2019. Since then, we've grown to, I think by last count, a little over 300 people here. Well, not here in the short north, but over there in the short north when we're actually in the office. So super excited to be here. Always love the chance to do anything OSU related. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Grant. And so happy to have you with us. It's just, it's fabulous what the Columbus ecosystem is doing. And truly sort of topping that all up is Dr. Ayanna Howard. We are so pleased to welcome her as our new Dean of Engineering, and fresh off of her debut on The View, we are super excited to welcome Dr. Howard. If you wouldn't mind spending a few minutes introducing yourself.
Yeah, so just a couple of stories around entrepreneurship, which I believe in wholeheartedly. So I actually sold my first artificial intelligence software packet as a grad student in 1996. So that tells you how old I am and how long I've been doing this. I currently have a startup still. It's called Zyrobotics. It's a assistive technology / ed tech company that focuses on children with special needs, so 3 years old to 7 years old. So using engineering know-how to really lean into the what I would say the disadvantaged communities. Basically giving back is what I'm doing with that. So that was founded in 2013. It's housed in Atlanta though, not in Columbus, but you know, with Grant, maybe we will be prompted to move it. But that's kind of what I've done in the entrepreneurial space. And so I think it's important as engineers, computer scientists, data analytics, data scientists to really think about entrepreneurship and the role that we have as developers, designers, and technologists to really make a difference and an impact in that space.
Great, thank you so very much. You know, you've all been so incredibly successful that as we look at this, you know, this is there, you know, we think that the journey for entrepreneurship is kind of, and to creating a successful startup, it, you know, is linear. But as you live it, you know that it's not, it looks more like a roller coaster. So I'm going to start with Grant. What do you wish you had done differently or sooner when you first started off?
Yeah, great question. And my first instinct is to answer something like, I wish I'd written down more things or documented more stuff. You know, as the company has grown from 20 people to 700 or whatever it is today, I still, to a surprising extent, find myself needing to dig through old emails and just like shore up our documentation from the simpler times. But upon you know, reflection a little bit, I think that answer suffers a bit from survivorship bias, where you know, with retrospect, knowing we made it and we came out the other side, it's very easy to say like, oh yeah, we should have done this differently and spent more time. We should have focused more on quality than speed and so on. And so I think the important thing to note here is just like, you know, you, the students, should anything I or you know, people like me standing up here in front of you say, like, take it with a bit of grain of salt. Like, you know, anytime someone's made it through that, it's what worked for them, and that may or may not be applicable. So always be skeptical, especially of my answers. Maybe not the co-panelists. They seem much more esteemed and capable of answering these questions. That being said, what I wish I would have done differently when starting out was being less afraid of being wrong, I think. So at various points in my life, career, education, so on, I implicitly assumed or expected that I guess I would have never said out loud that I knew it all, but I think I sort of expected like, oh, I've got this PhD or I'm boss of this like team or whatever, that like I needed to have all the answers. And I think some of that was suffering from imposter syndrome and just fear and not knowing that it's okay to be wrong and to be learning. And I think some of the success that we've had at Upstart is hiring people, you know, smarter, better than myself, and just getting out of their way and enabling them to do that. So I wish sooner on I would have leaned into what I didn't know, and just embrace that and taking it as an opportunity to either like fill gaps of my own or make mistakes and learn things and so on. And so it took a little while to build that confidence and really embrace mistakes rather than kind of shying away from them and expecting too much myself.
Arnab, did you know everything when you first started off?
Nothing, honestly. I actually really also loved that, as we have a stats PhD to remind us of bias, sampling bias and partial bias. It is very true. Essentially, any commencement talk that you listen to is of, the very few people who tell you to live their dream and all of those things, right? And it's essentially the sample size of, 5, right? But that being said, 100% agree with, and I want to build on what Grant said. A lot of projects that we don't see in the world right now are the ones that are in the minds of somebody who is just thinking, if only I had some more time, or, maybe I'll do it at some point when I am ready, or when the time is right. And to be honest, there's so much waiting, which I would simply say, the waiting is the critical issue. And so one of the things is, in terms of what I wish I had done sooner, was to have done this sooner. And instead of waiting for multiple years, saying, we built it out as open source, we put it out there and so on, instead of actually saying, let's just jump in with both feet and actually build out a proper company. And that was something that I wish I had done sooner, was to actually start the company sooner, or start the project sooner as well, because I was seeing the pain and the need. And so this was that was definitely something that I would have done differently, was to start sooner and just started ASAP.
So I'm going to go a little off script here, Dr. Howard. I apologize, but Arnab, a big reason why you didn't start it sooner was because you were going after tenure, right?
Yes, and sometimes there are students that you really want to work with, and wait for them to graduate. One of the hidden secrets is that a lot of the people that it's a little bit about planets aligning as well, and so getting for the students to wait to graduate, and then they're ready to actually jump in and so on. So yeah, one of the hidden secrets is that a lot of the Mobikit employees were Hack Ohio rock stars, right? And so I was waiting for them to actually graduate as well. But yes, faculty-led startups are an interesting beast, because there is another double life that I have to lead on the other side, and so that is its own set of challenges. And so you kind of have to think of the Bruce Wayne Batman type situation, where you have to get tenure and also think of this one at the same time. So it is impossible to do both well at once, and I'm a firm believer in sort of doubling down on one thing and doing it well. So there's a little bit of timing that we had to set up over there as well. Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Howard, you've done so much and accomplished so much in your career. You have your own startup. You inspire people and students every single day. How do you take the lessons from what you've done and what you've learned, as well as the lessons that we hear from Arnab and Grant and Emre and all the folks in our engineering ecosystem, and how do you take that and inspire them to take the incredible technology that they're developing out to the world?
So kind of building on what was said, is you have to be okay with knowing that you are going to quote unquote fail. So I think a lot of times as engineers, we want the perfect product. We want to get down to the 99.9999% accuracy before we share it with the world. And even if we get it to that point, it will fail, because they say no actual product can survive first contact with people. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
And so, working with students is really teaching and training them to be okay with the fact that it's not going to work the first time, 100% guaranteed. And it's not a failure, because you're going to be learning from it. And so teaching students that when you're out there, look to see why it didn't. So ask the questions. And if someone is doing something that you didn't anticipate, ask, oh, wait, I didn't model that behavior. Explain that to me. And so basically be a student to the customer, and you learn and you iterate, which is one, as an educator, then they also apply that in their classroom, right? So that they're okay with taking risks in terms of senior design and those aspects. So it's a transition, it's a different way of thinking, but I think most companies kind of know doesn't survive first contact, that their very first prototype, alpha, beta product that's deployed.
Thanks. And, I'm going to stick with you because that sort of leads to our next question, which is, so one of our questions that was posed to us is, how do you get past that prototype stage and start to make a polished product? Well, because when the folks who are involved in hackathons start, it's just really rudimentary. And people talk about having a minimally viable product. How do you get over, like, when do you morph from that minimally viable product? When do you bring it out to the marketplace? How perfect does it need to be? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it really depends on if it's software or hardware. But one of the nice things about, even I'll talk about hardware because hardware is harder, is there are so many resources that are out there that allow you to do things that look like a finished product at low counts, right? So like maybe you're only making 10 versus 1,000. Everything from prototyping a board to doing plastics and design. And now it's going to cost you a little bit more, but allows you to test things out at low yield. And as a student, it's fairly straightforward to use a lot of these tools and put forward something that looks really, really, really nice. Now it might cost times 10 what you're going to sell it for,
Right.
But it looks really pretty and it works and it's functional, and people won't basically say, why do I see the wires hanging out of the back? And so that's looking at those resources to design the real MVP with seemingly finished products, but not worrying so much about the cost.
Thanks. Grant, how developed was your product as you went to market, and how did you figure out making that transition from the MVP to the commercially ready product?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, there's the saying, I think it was Reid Hoffman, like, if you're not embarrassed by the product, you waited too long to put it out there. And that remains to be true today for us. Like I literally an hour ago was on a call where I was like, oh, we're still doing that. Like I thought, we haven't grown past that stage. So I think especially in software, it's just, it's constantly evolving. It's never as polished as the user or we would like, but it's an iterative process. And I think both Dean Howard and Arnab touched on this, the speed aspect and getting more data points really matters. So even if it's not the straight line linear path, like not waiting too long, and then getting to make a number of like small reversible changes and sort of, I guess, maximize the number of learnings. Another way to say that is maximize the number of mistakes, but minimize the impact of them, and then kind of iterate from there. So yeah, I wish we had a polished product that I could describe today. It's certainly more polished than it was before. And, being in the machine learning field, you often hear it described as, some mix of art and science. And I remain very thankful that I got in the early days when it was more art than science. We've hired a number of like very brilliant PhDs who are just like amazing at this stuff now that we've kind of gotten to where it's more of a science and pin that down. In the early days, it was, if you don't have any loans on which to train your machine learning model, you don't have any training data, you got to get pretty creative. And that was an artistic, fun process. But monthly, I find myself a little bit embarrassed of some of the decisions I made or had to make back in 2015 when we were in earlier days.
Well, apparently it all worked out. Okay, so last question, because I know that we're getting to the end of our time, but Arnab, you went from spinning out of the university to an exit to basically a strategic buyer within 2 years. How did you do that morph process from kind of that prototype to something that was ready for acquisition?
Again, Grant's point, statistical anomaly, not the not the usual trend. Very, very much want to highlight these things. All projects, whether it be startups or some other kind, they take time. This was about 2 or 3 years of spatiotemporal analytics research at the university. Then we went through understanding, having sort of a wave of commercial need, followed by a couple years as a company. So I wouldn't necessarily think of this as just the 2 years. I would want to add, the few years that and university-led startups have that secret, behind them, is that they have this foundational work of 3 or 4 years or 2 or 3 years of iteration that they're doing on that side too. So that's one thing, and the other one is we got lucky from the perspective of we were solving exactly the problem that someone else wanted solved as an exit. But just to sort of touch on what both Dean Howard and Grant mentioned is the ability to build something immediately has actually, is actually the main thing, is the iteration. That's what you should be optimizing for, right? Is because from a scientist's perspective, all you're trying to do is collect as much information from the market that this is something that people need, right? And this is worth doing. And then the other part is to actually solve this problem. Those are the two things. And so some of it was just to have this very aggressive sort of intent to iterate as fast as possible. If there is an assumption that we had, what is the cheapest way to test that assumption and test that hypothesis, and then move on, right? And build that flywheel of constant hypothesis testing. And that's something that we did, and we had to, in startup world, it's called pivoting really hard a lot of times and so on. But that very aggressive mentality needs to exist for a very good reason, because this is, time is the only one thing that that you cannot get back. And so that's one of the places where the aggressive iteration is probably one simplest way to answer that.
Well, I appreciate you talking a little bit about what you did before you spun out, because as I forget who said it, but it took them a decade to become an overnight success. I think that's kind of, what, we all see the fabulousness, and we all know that it takes a lot of hard work to get where you all are. Thank you so much for joining us. We have to do this again because I have a million questions I'd like to ask all of you, but for now we're done. I'm going to turn it over to Julia.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you all of our panelists, and for this very interesting, and I feel I was told this is our rock star panel, and we had 85 people listening in, which is great for a Friday night when we all have spring fever here on Zoom. We are going to just move right into the event. Come back to this room, which if you're in the gather space for ShowOHI, we're going to return here at 7:30. We're going to have some presentations. Also, all of you watching, your chance to vote. A Buckeye's Choice Award. That is, we have 20 presenters in booths in this gather space. Please go check them out, talk to them. The other voting is a photo booth award. So if you go into the main lobby, you'll see a photo booth, jump in, take a picture of yourself, show off a bow tie, and that will be on our galleries. We're going to vote on those as well. In between now and then, check out games in the lounge, maker stations in the lobby, mini presentations in this auditorium, and be sure to meet somebody new. This is a pretty cool event that we're able to do it virtually and not geolocated to Columbus and stuck here. So pretty cool to take advantage of this opportunity. Also, thank you to all of our Ohio State alumni. This event would not be possible without the support of the Ohio State Alumni Association, the help of the Kenan Center for Entrepreneurship, the Innovation Studio, and thank you to the OHIO team, Matthew Ayers, our student leader, Cal, our event manager and OHIO program coordinator, and the rest of our student leaders. So thank you very much. Have fun.